Hey, it's Chris. I called it, right? I told you at the beginning of the month that this was going to be a lot of money thrown around on crowdfunding the month of November, right? I know you're like, Chris, you're just hyping this. No. And this week, folks, is where it begins. Tons of huge projects, tons of money just finishing on the tail end of Dice Throne Outcasts, as well as the Root Homeland expansion. So you're getting off one wave, and the next one is already cresting up and ready to just envelop you, engulf you, and riptide you. Yeah, we deal with riptides here in Michigan, so it's a fact of life. You ready? Let's go. Oh, by the way, before the beginning here, I have to put this out. Again, right? Second week in November, saw 2 videos this week of best games of 2024. I called it last week. I called my shot and I said people are going to start launching it already in November, and it is upon us, right? It is upon us. I mean, we had to start with it, right? Avalon, the freaking Riven Vale, Shadowborne Games. Over $500,000 easily within the first 24 hours. Killing it. The follow-up to Oathsworn, right? Area, control, style, battling. 3-phase systems, 3 rounds in some of the phases, 2 whole seasons in the short game, 3 whole seasons in the larger game. Reading through the rule book, some of the dynamic concerns or hinge points that I have at this point is that each game is going to be constrained a little bit differently. You have the short game, like I mentioned, you have the long game. Who's playing the long game? He's playing the long game. Anyway, sorry. Squirrel. But what you've got going on is then essentially how you want to set up the game differently as well, because you can have slight, tiny minutia asymmetry in the terms of the lords being slightly different ability powers of the different factions. But in a more experienced game, you can give not only the lords different asymmetry powers, but you can get the faction depth-wise asymmetry as well. There's a catch-up mechanic that you can use if you want to play sort of beginner games or games with more or less experienced people as you go. But then there are the opposite. There is a flip side of the track that is going to be utilized in that way to be just no catch-up mechanic. Then you have a 3-ring board here, innermost area. Then there is 1 ring followed by another ring. And those are going to be face down at the beginning of the game. You are also going to then be taking off of units of those areas after each of the seasons, and may have some settlements that adjust that or affect that along the way. This is going to be 7 different cards of decks you're going to be drawing from, because the main action mechanism that you're doing is a programming-esque vibe where you choose your card, simultaneously play it, go on initiative order. Then do that several times in a round, then war in the order of areas as chosen by the game. Of those decks, at the end of your rounds, as you're like clearing up, doing the prep phase, you're going to be shuffling up some of those for artifacts and beasts, as well as the Holy Grail, to change it up on a round-by-round basis. Prophecy cards will also be changing on a round-by-round basis as you progress and have different victory conditions or events that are going to affect as you're playing. Now, flipping over to the rule book here, you can see a breakdown of what some of these cards look like as you're doing that prep phase that I mentioned of playing 3 rounds of, well, putting these cards out, paying the cost on the left-hand side, and then having the effects, the discounts, the strengths, all of those things, including the initiative that I mentioned, to go along with it. As you're doing that, then subsequently on your turn, you have the ability to resolve your card and then activate any abilities that you may want to. Now, the other types of actions that you're going to be doing include the standard action here as well. If you're deciding to do that, you can use that to then deploy additional units into regions, build settlements, or move from place to place. So that's going to be sort of your mitigation as you're going along, it appears. Now, the other interesting dynamic, as we skip very skimmily over the preparation phase of your moving between regions, the important part of this is, as I mentioned, those tiles are face down with mists. If you don't move in there with your lord, it illustrates, then they are in the mist, they have no strength, and cannot move from the region until it is revealed by a lord in the first place. So not only are the lords going to be more powerful, as they typically are in this style of game, the interplay of the actual dynamics of the board are going to be drastically different depending on where your or someone else's lord is or is not. This is also in this revealing, exploring of the mists in the first place, is where the mist cards themselves are flipped up, revealing the tiles, also revealing those mythical beasts or the grail in the first place, or the artifacts that you're seeding, like I said, in the preparation for the next phase every single time. You're vying for control of these, you're getting the beasts on your side, or I mean, it's the freaking grail. You know what to do with the grail, right? So it talks then about the abilities that are going to be part of this, the different faction powers that you can utilize, and again, what the grail actually represents here. Gets you strength, gets you victory points, everything that you're gonna love. Talks about the prophecies and the gaining favor. I'll leave the rest for later. And again, I'll probably have to do a should you or should you not back this one at some point. Again, there's some video content on the page that talks about it right here. The pledge levels, again, very interesting dynamic. $59 for the retail, which is your standee version if you're looking very closely, right? 5 Lord miniatures, the rest standees. Okay, I like that. It's not bad at all. Team standee. Core edition. Again, that's a big price jump. $40 for, well, a significant chunk of miniatures. So comparatively, that's probably not bad altogether with the amount of miniatures there. And the rest of the cards are basically the same in terms of gameplay content otherwise when you're comparing numbers to numbers there. And then down here, the deluxe edition, you're starting to see the additional upgrades, your deluxeification level, if you will, with your holofoils and your gold stamps. You can't triple stamp, double stamp! Anyway, sorry. Triple layered faction boards, custom faction trays. I kind of wish there were layered boards up here for the other two, and that's one small quality of life measure that should be almost across the board if I'm having to track powers and abilities. I don't want the cube sliding around, so that's hopefully available elsewhere. Now this is interesting because the collector's all in and the deluxe all in, you're getting actually expansion content here with the Ironforged and the Mistwalkers and Vernax the Black Dragon. So that's gameplay content, not just deluxeification there. So I'm assuming if we get down to the add-on section here, you'll be able to see how much you can individually add those for. So that'd be the main question is, are they going to be both available in standee and miniature? If they're only available in the miniature version, then there's no reason to get the standee version, this retail one that I just talked about a second ago. So then it runs you through the 4 different factions here. Obviously the Knights of the Round, Mordred and the Undead, Merlin and the Druids. And I'm not as familiar with Balor and the Fomorians. So the other 3, very, very straightforward. And I'm really intrigued to see now, seeing this, the Ironforged and the Mistwalkers, what that's exactly going to entail. And some of the dynamic asymmetry that's going to go along with that. Green Knight, oh, that's freaking awesome. Telios, White Heart, again, mythical beasts are all over the place. I mean, those are fantastic looking miniatures. If I painted, this will be a no-brainer to get the miniature aspects of things. But, I mean, that's the problem, right? I'm not a painter. Although, if they actually do the colored plastic, I kind of wish these were in colored plastic too. If this is like truly representative right here, I actually like that because then it's not just everything gray chunks on the board. You don't need the little circles that you put on the bottom of miniatures in the first place, which I kind of hate, to be frank with you. And yeah, so here we go, deluxeifications. Mistwalker expansion is going to cost you $20. And it looks like, yes, it looks like just a miniature version there. Ironforged upgrade, and oh, no, sorry, this isn't a faction. I was wrong. This is just markers and deluxeifications. This is just literally heavier stuff with metal. So it's that exactly. And the Mythical Beast here, $10 for one guy. Okay. If he's really freaking cool. Was that the early back thing or back in the first 24 hours? Misttouch miniatures. Okay. Mistwalkers expansion. That was the other one I was missing. So again, video content is here. It seems to be a common theme from what people were saying is that people are comparing it to Blood Rage. When I look at this, I don't think of Blood Rage at all, actually, with the moving the lords around, having to explore those areas. Like, Blood Rage doesn't have areas you're popping up or exploring. I'm not recruiting things. So it's going to be the easy comparison, but I feel like it's more of a Black Angel Troyes style of things. So I'm going to watch some of the gameplay on this, and I'm really kind of impressed by this one. So this one has stayed and shot up on my wish list even after seeing this, even as someone who is not a huge area control person in the first place. Lands of motherfucking Evershade. $2 million in the first day. People are just throwing money at this, right? Wow, $2 million in the first day. And is this the best Awaken Realms game ever? No one knows. No one's going to be able to tell you for 3 years. And somehow they're projecting this one to be basically a year out. I have my significant concerns and doubts about that, frankly. And a year out, a huge RPG sprawling campaign. That tells me that you think you're further along in the development of this one than any of the ones you've put out, I don't know, up to this date, basically. So we'll see. Again, it's the typical Awaken Realms campaign in the sense that they're separating it out. You can get the miniatures. You can get the standees. There are an acrylic upgrade package that you can do additionally if you prefer something else in between. Now, the trick is, in the first updates today, they've already said that, quote unquote, they're going back to true monetary stretch goals. And so do you think that true monetary is going to be giving you a better value? Do you care about that, I guess is the question. The other thing I have to ask, as you know, a compact dungeon crawl, grid-based system, is after watching some of the gameplay content, what is the exact unique standout feature of this? The main thing I've seen is that you've got this flipping of the action system here, where every time it comes back around to you, you have a chance to refresh these to do them again. And I don't really know how unique that is, right? It's like tapping things in other games. So we'll kind of have to wait and see. The other aspect that they're really marketing, the most unique thing I would make arguably, is that you just kind of like flip this thing shut to keep track of all of your stuff, right? The tokens and the cards and the abilities and that upgradableness. Because otherwise, I don't really see the vast difference. Putting it out there as an RPG, choose your own adventure style game, if this didn't have Awaken Realms on it, would you be as enamored with it, I guess? I don't know. Character creation, okay, great. Secrets and surprises, okay, is it actually going to be as grindy as some of their other games like ISS Vanguard in that, you know, aspect have been? The modularity, the replayability of adventures, right? You know, when I think of choose your own adventure books, you read it through like once and maybe like halfway, you know, like randomly go back and choose one or two things differently in your second read of the book. And I don't know anyone that was like, you know what, I am going to read from start to finish the choose your own adventure book, every single detail to get every single ending. I maybe, again, I'm the minority there. I look at that as like marketing rather than, you know, you necessarily doing that. And by you, I mean me, because, right, I'm looking at me. And I would love to think I'm going to do those, but the truth is in a lot of these games, whatever they are, even the ones that I love, the choose your own adventure style, Aeon Trespass Odyssey, which we'll be talking about here in the future again, I just don't do as much of that as I would personally like to do. And that's a function of where I'm at in life and too many games. So, you know, handbook. Okay, sample handbook. And, you know, I downloaded this handbook right now, and this just screams really a D&D for people that haven't played D&D. I mean, like, everything in here seems like, at least on surface value from the small sample that they've got that I've looked at here, it's just, you know, that sort of thing. You know, kind of D&D in storybook form. So it's more like you want to play D&D and you can't play D&D, rather than, again, like something that I haven't seen before. And I think that's fine. I think that's great, actually, you know, personally speaking. It makes it more accessible if you can't. But, I mean, a lot of it is even, hey, you want to choose your profession, the druid, the mage, the fighter, the stereotypical tropes that we see in D&D. Roll a d12, or just choose. So with this handbook, right, this is like my player's handbook for D&D 5th edition that's sitting over there unused behind the camera. It's very, very outlining similar. So I don't see necessarily the huge difference in surface value right now. I want to see it. I hope that there's more. So I guess it's really going hard into that aspect of things, right? This is probably the D&D-est D&D, if you will, on the tabletop. If that gets people into D&D, or if that is what you would like, as, you know, myself, who wants to do D&D and can't, I think that's fantastic. So I just also didn't see anything like dramatically different with the skirmish gameplay. Although watching Rolling Solo, he said that some of the other maps that are there, because you've got a hex-based grid situation, they will accommodate multiple characters as opposed to not accommodating multiple characters and having to not be able to move through them and having to go around them and not move diagonally. So again, I'd like to see more. I'd like to see some of the actual rule book, not the handbook, to say, okay, where are the nuances in these mechanics, in these advanced abilities, to make me really go through things? Because when I looked through the handbook here, I didn't see anything that was drastically, again, 200 pages of lore and character creation options. That seems like taking the first 5 minutes of Skyrim and creating a 200-page book for it, which is nothing different than what D&D or Pathfinder has done already. It really just feels like it's taking those aspects of things, putting it in a different wrapping, presenting it to players who haven't done D&D and saying, this is, something new. Well, it's not necessarily, right? All of this is very, very much D&D creation-wise. And this is the organization that I'm talking about, is you can line up these things here, line up these things here, and basically just shut it and keep track of it, which is probably the coolest thing I've seen on here as a whole. Action cards, item cards, action cards, with less of the necessarily upkeep with the other things like, say, Dungeon Universalis, which is going or finishing concurrently. I love the miniatures, looking fantastic. We're not even through the rewards though, and these graphics on these pages just seem to be getting bigger and bigger, right? Professions, there you go, you archetypes of everything, right? As you see it with D&D, that it, stratifies down into your subclasses. So everything that you need is there. The dangers are cool. I'd like to see some of the nuances of the enemies that they talk about in the preview. They're like, hey, all of these enemies are going to have different tactics and strategies and how you're going to have to defeat them. Okay, like, how is this different than the boss battling in Grimhaven, which is, supposedly the, main thing that's there? Like, so I just am wanting to see more, I guess. Levels 1 to 4, 5 to 8, 9 plus. Okay, well, D&D, right? Everybody is stuck down here at the starting adventure levels. Everyone wants to have more at the expert levels. So that's going to be the big challenge and the big trick, right? When these characters in Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder start to get to the super high levels and they start to get uber powerful, as everyone says, it's really hard to create encounters that are halfway balanced or halfway challenging because things just get OP. Over 9,000. So that's where I get concerned. Everybody has 3,700 adventures and scenarios for these levels. These are super easy when you're super limited. But when you get super powerful and you're combo creating and you're just ability smashing together and you're casting spells like Wish, how do you manage that? I have no idea. So if you're looking for D&D, go do D&D. But if you're looking for a board game that's going to give you an approximation, well, this is going to be out there. And we'll see, right? Here's the standard edition, $79. And again, one of the updates today, they said this is the special edition, going to be GameFound exclusive. Going to be GameFound exclusive. Going to be GameFound exclusive. That's what they said with a lot of this stuff. So that's already being put out there, depending on how you feel about some of this right here, right? This is gameplay content that's GameFound exclusive. So I'm not sure how I feel about this. This would probably be the easiest thing now, seeing all of this stuff, if you wanted to get into D&D and never could. Is it going to replace it? No. Is it doing anything drastically different than D&D is doing with some of those creator creation things right now? The dice rolling defensive system, the dice rolling attack system, I'm not seeing things drastically different. I'd wonder, and I guess I'd really have questions, is how are some of these paths and some of these abilities that much different than stuff from D&D and Pathfinder? Are you making it that much more unique, or is this going to be eerily very similar in that way? Because I imagine that some people want it very similar, and I'd imagine that some people are going into this, hoping that this is going to be a vast departure. So videos, like I said, all of the people that are smarter and better than me, they've got videos on here. You can check them out too and see how you feel about it. And a big insert to go along with it there. Sundrop, which looks amazing as always. and a little bit of all the other stuff that goes along with it. Somehow miniature highlights there as well. So there you go. Everything's on the page. And again, the one thing I'll say that I do not see on the page, again, is a rulebook. And I want to see a rulebook for this. How much minutia are you getting into with some of this stuff? Rolling Solo's playthrough was absolutely very easily accessible from that aspect. But from the how much other upkeep will there be later on as you're advancing to those higher levels, no freaking clue. But millions and millions of dollars coming your way, so give it a look-see. Then a huge, massive funder here, out of nowhere, like 3 days before it was launched, we got news that Shin Megami Tensei was going to be coming to us from the Sega style of, well, video games in the first place. This is going to be a big test of how much, again, do you love IP value. This is not a huge departure from some of the other Japanese designers and projects I see routinely on crowdfunding, but it is a little bit less so, actually. And so we're going to have to see how this evolves and what else we're going to see before the end of the campaign. The problem is the FAQ at the top gives you no information on if you actually have more information before the end of the campaign to help you figure out whether this, I'm going to call it more of an area control, Cthulhu Wars style of game with a little bit of smashing together, summoning demons with a slight narrative component, if you will. And that's just based off of reading here because there's no actual gameplay content at the time of me filming this. There is no rule book. So that, again, that's what I'm talking about in terms of information. The story goes, you're starting off neutral, depending on who you summon, how you fuse these demons as allies, enemies, or potential things to control on your side. That's going to determine your alignment, which is going to have different consequences and different abilities potentially set out to you. The narrative style of things is because how you're going to be summoning these demons, it appears, is that you're going to be having narrative choices with them and conversations, essentially, to maybe win them over to your side or say the right thing or the wrong thing to them. The fusion that I mentioned, grimoire sort of artifact style cards, as well as event cards that are going to be affecting in some way, shape, or form the 9 different regions that you're going to be trying to control and somehow win over at the end of the final battle. So lots of miniatures, lots of cards to go along with it, but that is essentially everything on the page that's going to help you make a decision right there. And I'm hoping that there is going to be a lot more information. But this also, you know, having a lot of this in Japanese still and not a lot of component in English, it doesn't surprise me. But I just hope that, okay, having a few of these that have been very select English, the translation that goes into that has to be very, very, very well done. So this is it, right? The demon dialogue, somehow demon fusion, fuse your allies to get more powerful demons, conquer the areas somehow, and there's going to be a great battle at the end. There you go. That is everything, and this has a ton of money for an unknown, and so it speaks IP, but is that enough to convince you? Then we're talking World Order here. Almost at $500,000. Tremendous. Hegemonic Games. The follow to Hegemony as sort of a lighter, more streamlined-ish, as, again, someone self-professing, I have not played Hegemony, so I can only go off of what I know about both of them, what I've read, what I've heard people say, and how the rulebook appears to me, because I will be having a video out later in this campaign to be able to give you my interpretation of how I feel this game does, or what it's doing in the first place, right? I have a rulebook, and so what this game is going is over 6 rounds, I believe. You're going to be having a sort of 3-phase system where you basically produce your resources, play your action cards, 4 per in the round, and you lay them on the tableau in front of you. You're going to be utilizing those cards in like kind of a 4 different manner way in order to produce more resources, to import export, as in being able to sell goods in order to buy goods, or buy goods then sell goods, or move your military around, establishing bases, moving your troops, or even gaining influence, allying yourself with cards that will be available in a market style vibe to align yourself with them in the first place by paying the cost and being reduced actually by the amount of other countries that you're allied with in the first place. then the last element of things, and I think this is actually kind of neat, the cleanup phase of things at the end, you look at the cards that are in front of you, and then you look at the cards that are in your hand, and based on the cards that are actually in your hand at the end, that determines what bonuses you get, but it also determines how many other cards you can use to do your sort of deck build before you then move those off into your discard pile, rinse and repeat over time. So it is an area control faction-based situation. And they've got a few asymmetric dynamics for the powers that be. Like United States, for example, if you're not influential in enough areas by the end of the game, it's like the superpower overreach is what it's called, then you actually lose victory points. So you have to play up to your strengths or what you're known for, essentially. The People's Republic of China, as an example, in a different way, has an extra import and export that they can do in a round by round situation. And so all of these are going to give you slight differences in the global powers as you're going along. And there's going to be ways to flip. There's going to be ways to utilize these cards in multiple different avenues, whether they are face up, whether they've been turned face down, when you choose to do the imports, the exports, the whatever it may be. There's a lot going on there. I was a little worried when I was reading through the rule book, as you know, just a little bit of insight about the length of it, because I was like, okay, how heavy is this going to be? It was a relatively easier read for someone like myself, and so I'm not like super heavy gamer, and so I was encouraged by that. It's more depth of how much availability on your board in terms of the production, because there's like 3 regular goods that you're making resource wise, and then there's like a whole nother set of like 3 or 4, I can't remember off the top of my head, I'm sorry, about things that you will be producing additionally that are more like complicated or different things that you can be importing and exporting, and each will have a set value of how much they're worth, whether you're importing them to buy them or exporting them as in selling them to gain goods. And a lot of this is going to be the currency exchange style of things, but it's a card driven tableau system, which it gives me more vibes of, like I just mentioned, the depth of play is driven by the cards and the card acquisition rather than the depth of the rule book. So there's plenty of videos already on the page as well. You can check out the price point here, which, you know, again, I was a little concerned about this with crowdfunding inflation going around. $59 for the base pledge, and then you have $75 for the educational softcover, which you know, that might not be your ilk. It's not my, you know, preferred thing either, but that's going to also get you the World in Turmoil expansion, which I know absolutely nothing about. And then you can get Superpower or Global Hegemon and get a whole bunch of deluxifications for extra. So, yeah, it kind of falls under the price that we've seen for deluxe heavy Euros, but slightly more than just the regular base games of things. So it kind of falls right where I sort of hoped it would be expectation-wise. Is it for you, though? If you want to know more, check it out when I go live as well. Rulebook is not officially on the page, so sometime during the campaign, I'm sure they'll post that as well. And you can play it online right now. Everyone else has some super good videos you can check out, because again, their opinion's probably better than mine, and you can get all the little upgrades that are going to go with some deluxifications as well as some gameplay. So that's kind of nice. I like the combination personally. There you go. That's World Order Lairs. Then I talked about it at the beginning of the week as well in the games that were sent to me. Kids Table Board Games sent me a copy of Lairs, and so I have a prototype copy with a few different elements of things not fully maximized out. But my dedicated video at some point, hopefully again during this campaign, will be illustrating some of the highlights, and it really is a heavy vibe of Battleship, if you will. Stay with me though, stay with me. It's Battleship meets sort of Stone Spire Architects boss monster style of things, because what you're doing behind your little hidden alcove of a trifold is you are physically building a lair with wooden pieces, and then you are having your opponent move their piece through your dungeon, trying to, well, not really successfully avoid things, but mitigate things as you're going along, traps and monsters that will affect their ability to do so, score victory points, and then having a slight action tableau system and have a slight variable set collection, artifact-based, treasure-based point scoring system in addition to your other objectives that you're going to be doing along the way. And I say that because part of this dungeon, right, is to get from the beginning to the end before your opponent. That scores you victory points. However, in order to actually escape, you have to have enough treasure chests and or monsters, or the combination thereof, completed/defeated. And that's going to score you more victory points, but you have to have enough of them to even exit. And so even if you find the exit, you can't actually exit. And it gives you the layering system that we see in a lot of other games nowadays, or that are slowly being incorporated into other games like this, where they say, okay, first game, play this. Second game, add this. Third game, add this. Fourth game, add this. And so that's what I have with about 4 secret envelopes in my box right now. And it appears that even just on this page, there is a lot more going into the deeper dungeons style of things. And with kids table board games, this is much higher actually than their previous ones. The everything in for I think many of the past previous ones have been more along the 49 than the 82. Don't believe me? Well, I pulled up the other 3 pages here of their more recent ones. Creature Comforts here, 59 Canadian dollars, and then Power Plants Deluxe, 55 Canadian dollars, and Maple Valley, 72 Canadian dollars. But even 72 is only $54. So that's a relatively big price point increase. So let's see what else you're getting. You're getting the bundle deal with the exclusives, with the upgrades, right? These treasure chests are nice. I don't think that's absolutely unnecessary. I like the monster meeples. They give a nice presence, but they also give a little bit in the way, I feel like, on the prototype. So we'll see what they end up being in that way at the final edition. That's a eraser. Don't Sagrada Artisans me. I'm going to be equal here. I wasn't a big fan of the colored pencils. I'm not a fan of the pencils or the eraser here. Again, metal chests, blinging, exclusive trap. Okay, exclusive monster, exclusive treasure set. Okay, there's your gameplay. And in the past, they've actually done a ton of other like mild gameplay mini expansions that have been the other reason to back it. So this is what you're getting. You have your recessed board. And the thing I worried about was you have these monsters, and I want them all to be different. That was my problem with Stone Spine Architect as a whole, right? Is that all the monsters were just sort of set collect rather than asymmetric, and this gives you asymmetric. The other tricky point that you're seeing here is this is based on your cubes that you have allocated on your board. It's sort of got a little bit of an Expeditions vibe as you move your cubes from one area to the next, refreshing them, exhausting them, and utilizing them. And then the enemies or the monsters or the traps are actually going to take them to the third column, and they're going to put them in the super fatigued essentially. And so then every time you want to spend all of your cubes if you so choose, but then you refresh them one box to the left after you use them. So the ones that you use normally get moved one box to the right and in the middle. And then if the ones get super fatigued by like the monster here, and this is going to be the tricky part, is you then use those same cubes as your actions, which may cost you anywhere between 1, 2, and 3 cubes to then use as dice. You know, like if you spend 1 additional cube after you land on a monster space, you get 1 die to roll and meet whatever this value is in the upper left-hand corner of the trap or the monster. If you fail, well, in the trap, you just, take the damage or take the fatigue or take whatever you get in terms of badness. But then in the monster, you actually end up doing that much damage, and then you are, forced to stay in that position and either escape next turn or continue to deal damage. And you're going, well, why would I want to stay there and continue to deal damage, Chris, and lose some of my cubes or, have them be exhausted further? Well, again, because I said that's part of the end game victory condition. You have to have enough of these monsters defeated. Now, the tricky part you're saying is, on this recessed board, Chris, why can't I just back someone into a corner and put like 4 traps and 4 monsters in a row? One of the main rules about placement when you're setting this up is you can only have 1 monster and 1 trap between your adventurer, the beginning of where they're going to be, and the path to get to either the exit or the treasure. Each individual one. So there cannot be 2 monsters between you and a single treasure. There cannot be 2 traps between you and a single treasure. There cannot be 2 traps along the only path to get from point A to point B, essentially. Whatever point A and point B are along the route. And so more monsters, more packages, more envelopes that you're adding. So I have 4 of those. I'm not sure if they're the exact 4, if these are like bigger. Here you go. You can check out some of the additional stuff as well. Ooh, 3 secret monsters to go along with the traps. And what's the deeper dungeon do? Because I don't have this. Bigger dungeons. Okay, so just larger size, everything there. Multiplayer mode. I'm not sure how I'd feel about that. Boss monsters. I think that could be kind of nice. Some asymmetry there. I think that's probably the biggest thing. The character skills, gears, and unique advantages. I'd almost say I'm more interested with this stuff than I am some of this stuff right here, just knowing what I know about the game already. So if that helps, I mean, I'd almost say this is, I hate to say that, an expansion that I would be really, really desiring if I was looking at this as a whole. But again, it's kind of hard to say too, if you're like me and you want more asymmetry or you want like the boss side of things. I really like ramping things up, boss battles, expansion for Keep the Heroes Out. So yeah, there you go. And it runs you through everything else you need to know. And again, a few stretch goals here that we already talked about above, a few contests, a few videos, and other content as well there from, again, smarter people that will give you everything you need to know. So I will hopefully have something out here maybe in the next week as well, briefly talking about my thoughts more in depth on Lairs in case this wasn't enough. Kickstarter, stop it, you're drunk. Then we have up Storyfold Wildwoods, and this is one from Open Owl Studios, and I was really intrigued by this initially, and it was even one of those where I potentially even had the opportunity to like try it out. But it was a solo game, and I was like, I'm not like a big solo gamer. Like, I wanted not to be in over my head, essentially, from that aspect of things. What it gives me vibes of, just off the gameplay and the videos that I've seen so far, you know, from the prototype style of things, is it's got sort of this folding storyboard that you're going through. It's got sort of an Arc Nova-esque tableau card system that you're utilizing, with a heavy emphasis on skill checks. And although mechanistically, I don't think that's very similar, the closest vibe just off the top of my head with, again, my lack of or very limited, therefore, knowledge of solo games was more of Legacy of You. Just, you know, the vibe, the overall weight, the length of gameplay, the linking of these scenarios, like just that in general. The thematic, the actual mechanisms, like I said, not really there. On the little animation here that you saw, you can see that the 4 cards go right under the actual flipboard. And that's because what there's going to be on each of these flipboard spots is a number that's going to be associated with the skill check, i.e. how easy it is to take one of these actions that the cards are lined up underneath. And as you utilize them, you slide it out like it's doing here, and you move it down to the end, a la your Arc Nova situation. And so certain actions are going to be easier or better to take at certain times. You're going to be gathering crystals that will allow you to get different skill checks. You're going to have different elements of things on both ends of these boards that you're dynamically going to have to be exploring successfully, as well as skill checking along the way. That's my depth of knowledge. So you're going to really have to probably watch some of the videos, because it doesn't give you any more significant details here, I don't think, at least on the page. And so what you're getting with it, though, is the deluxe bundle. Ooh, solo game, $85. That's expensive. And I guess this begs the question right here, right? I've got this quote that isn't a board game, it's an experience. Okay. And the other quote from like One Stop Co-op Shop was somewhere on this page too. And it was like, if this game didn't have the actual theme, I would still be all in it for the mechanics. So, you know, which one are you preferring? Do you really love the narrative and the theme? Do you really love the mechanics? Well, does this have both? Prepackaged everything, insert, prepackaged, separated for ease of use. Okay, I mean, we talked about that in my Unpopular Opinions video about how sometimes that just complicates it, even though it looks really pretty sitting in the box then. I have no idea with this one, and I'd argue that as a solo game, I don't really need a miniature that's going to have that, but if you're going to bling it, go bling it. So all of the luxifications you can get there, which appear to be Kickstarter exclusive, and there you go, right here. But with even out those things, the mechanics are a blast. So it's a solo game, and you know, I was a little surprised at the funding level, but then again, I reminded myself when I pulled this page up earlier, this is a solo game, right? So this is still really good. This is in those lines of like kids games and abstracts, where I still think that's a really good amount for how much they've got. But I also look at it and I go, this isn't a game for me, and I'm completely okay with that. And organized, keep it session by session, 30 minutes, or link them together. Replayability, yep, okay. Yeah, I don't know. This, again, check out some video content. I had to get some video content because I wanted to see the flow. I just didn't get, you know, sometimes the flow of the explanation without watching it played, and this was one of those. So if you're like me, give this a look-see, give some video content, and Open Owl will, you know, show you what they got. So that is Storyfold. Not going to pretend to be an expert on this one, folks, but one of you guys in the comment section actually let me know, and I had no clue about this, and then this makes a lot more sense in my head. That Clans of Caledonia is not really obtainable right now. I just figured this was, you know, as a dry, I'm sorry, I can't help myself, as a mid to heavyweight Euro game that's been out since what, like 2017, that it was just still widely available. And it's not, it's like hardly available at all anywhere online, which is crazy to me for like one of the top like 60 games or so ranked on Board Game Geek, right? So the fact that this honestly doesn't have more at this point is really surprising to me. But what this says to me, with 3,700 backers and $250,000, is it says you have a lot of people coming back for more, not as much necessarily just jumping in, which again, just kind of like my thoughts that go through this when I see those numbers. And it's offering you, I believe, 6 new gameplay modules. I'm not going to pretend or make a show of, understanding this game. It's outside my depth. It's one of those that at some point, at some time in my gaming career, I might look at getting. This is heavier than probably most of the stuff in my collection, though. So the question I would wager and guess is, do you want a big box insert? Do you want 6 new gameplay modules? Because the other thing, when you go down here and click the gameplay modules, which we'll do in a second, is they say that that's 11 total gameplay modules to go along with this game and mix and match however and how many ever you so choose. So, I mean, if this is your vibe, man, this is like right up there. It's a little expensive, but it's not anything that I would say is out of line with the previous Karma Games price point at all. And that's actually really freaking good price right there for the base game. Because when I looked before filming this video tonight on the availability of it in the first place, like I said, right, I wanted to be actually like right on this. And because I have no clue. I'm always the idiot, right? I made the stupid mistake of just getting myself in trouble in the comment section this week. And so I apologize for that. But $42. I believe the base game listed on Karma Games' website, which says it's out of stock right now, is like 55 euros. So this is 39 euros. So that, if that is, correct on my memory from like half an hour ago, that's really good. What's really surprising is the base game and the expansion are the same price. So, well, no discount if you're getting it all in, but that's still discount comparatively. So, I mean, if this is your thing, right? Like, I can't speak to it, but there's a reason that in 2017, this right here got a bunch of stuff. So, you check it out. It's got $250,000. You've got the rule book. People have been playtesting this online because, when I was looking at the forums earlier this year, because it was delayed several times on crowdfunding, they were having like online tournaments. People were playing this. They were testing it. They were tweaking it. They were modifying it. Commented on previously was, actually, I don't mind them being delayed because it means you're coming to crowdfunding with a more complete, more ready to go project. So that's why you also see the delivery date here on all of these as June 2025. Which, if you're that far along and you've place tested it like they say right here, then that doesn't surprise me. 6 months, right? 6 months-ish. And I think this was the third in their series of games where they said they're going to try and ship them all over production-wise together from China. So you'll get them all very similar. So here are the heavy folks. They're going to tell you everything you need to know. Go to them. They're smarter than I am. Everything you need. Oh, look, this is just what I was talking about, right? Millennia, Tracks of Time, and then Thiefdom, and then I don't know if Peninsula was a crowdfunding or is that just a retail, but I think they're all just kind of coming over together, and so you can add them all with the same pledge manager as well. So there you go, everything out there, and we'll see where it goes. But Clans of Caledonia doing really freaking well, and it seems like people are really happy to see it come back, so good. Then the next up from Button Shy called Glass Garden. Speaking of another solo game, 17 grand right now, and a little bit of their back catalog as always available, or you can order off their website in addition. $12 game and a mini expansion. So you're making a 3x9 grid, you're moving a critter across, it's slowly damaging your plants, but you're then trying to shift your plants in the first place up, down, left, right in ways to combine them to get the right resources to make them grow. Growing plants along the edges then also allows you to flip some of the glass cards, which subsequently then allows more sunlight to allow other growth elsewhere. Critter damage, lowering them by a row and shifting them as it goes. Critter goes all the way to the end, and then the game ends and you see how much you score. The free mini expansion with this one is offering you a few more critter cards and a few more centerpiece cards in order to make it just a little bit more dynamic and more replayable. That's it. That is the whole thing. Doing great as always. Solo, small style, 17 grand. Give it a look-see. Next up, SAS Rogue Regiment, the expansion Operation Gain. And this is a 5-part, as it says here, expansion campaign plus a reprint of the original edition. Got 64 grand right now. This is more like a V Commandos Metal Gear Solid-esque vibe in a 2-based phase system. And so what you do essentially is you have the stealth phase. Basically go around and avoid doing stuff that's going to arouse suspicion for as long as possible. Because once the stealth gauge fills up enough, then all war breaks loose essentially, and you have to escape because all of a sudden reinforcements and tons of bad guys are going to come flooding in. And not only do you have to complete the mission, either before or after that point, you also then have to have everybody escape alive. So that is in a nutshell. On an action turn-based system, having 4 action points of the about 10 different actions that you can do on a turn-by-turn, round-by-round basis with your asymmetric units, as well as your, well, as you can see here, grid-based system. So I can't go into any other depth or features right now. I think this is more of your skirmish v commando style game. I guess with this one also offering new mission modes of infiltration, which again, the stealth is going to be higher than the normal ones, but if you trigger it in this case, it just completely fails. All the stuff's compatible. And what are we talking in terms of getting stuff? 35 pounds. Oh, 135 pounds. That bumps it up, but it looks like you're getting 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 or 5 expansions and stretch goals with that. So that's a huge price creep there in terms of jumping, but I would assume that maybe you can piecemeal it if you just wanted like the base game and not everything else. Or maybe not. That's kind of weird. Can you get anything else? Let's see. I mean, the rule book is there. It's a 40-page rule book. It's not a bad read. And yes, you can. It looks like just the base game right there. Black box edition, which they have the little separate expansions here too. So it's a better deal. It's going to save you a little money. But yeah, okay. Doing really well. People like it. Give it a look-see. Next up from Draco's Table, the same people that brought us Sea Dragons, a great little game that I have sitting, you don't even know where it is anymore, sitting over there. Actually, it might have gotten put behind one of these, I think, actually, is Polaris. I try and remember where things are in here. It's a mess. You guys can't see it behind the camera, but $11,000. It's funded $38. If you backed Sea Dragons previously, you can get new Sea Dragon colors as a thank you for getting in on this one and backing previously. So this is a create a constellation in a rotating grid-based lunar-driven card aspect game. That makes sense to you? Well, so what you're doing here is you have this rotating outside grid, and you're going to be taking one of 3 actions on your turn. One of them is to just draw up action cards from the market in the first place. There's going to be basic actions, which are free. You just grab them and put them in your hand. However, they're going to be advanced actions, and you're going to be spending your stars, which are another basic resource, but also potentially a victory point situation. You have to spend them in order to grab the advanced cards, which are going to then give you more options for placement of your constellation / star pieces in the center area of this picture as you're going along. And you're going to be using that to make connections to make constellations. These constellations are going to be objective driven, that are going to be common objectives throughout the game for all the players. And the game goes until someone triggers the 5th scoring common objective, and then you score up all your points based on your constellations, your personal objectives, as well as those shooting star currency coins that I mentioned. Because after you take your turn, either drawing your card, playing as many cards as you want, or taking your 3 shooting stars, you just rinse and repeat. As you take your 3 different actions, drawing those cards up to 5 in a hand before you decide to have to play them, because on the second example action is that you just play cards from your hand, but you can only play ones that show the same lunar phase of things, because if you look very closely at some of these cards, we'll go down here if we can find a picture of the cards. They have different lunar aspects on them, and so you can see the different phases of the moon there. And so if they have the same phase, you can put out all of the same cards. However, those shooting stars that I mentioned as the currency that will also be endgame victory points not only allow you to grab the advanced action ones that you can see here with the silver edges, but they also allow you to change the phase of the moon out there so that you can put out more of these cards on a turn-by-turn basis. And like I said, the last one is just to grab 3 of those currency in order to manipulate all the other things to help you out as you go along. So, I mean, that's a powerful quote right there. I would play it any day of the week. I really enjoyed it. So, yeah, I don't know. This one has a little bit more try before I buy for me personally. I was a big fan of Sea Dragons, though. It's still in my collection. As I mentioned, take an action card, play an action card, grab 3 star tokens, score the common goals, rotate the frame, and rinse and repeat until you score 5 of those common goals. It's mostly deluxifications here and a little bit of upgrades. if that is your thing, right? And I don't think Sea Dragons has been super widely available either. It wasn't, at least when the first campaign came around. That's why they were doing it English for the North American market. And so I'd imagine this is going to be very similar in that way. So 11 grand, there you go. Next up is Tatsumi. This is from Adam's Apple Games, and you may know them because they did Planet Unknown, which was a big sleeper hit. And I'm looking at Tatsumi in the same light. This is actually perhaps, you know, one of the biggest ones for me of the month that I was really interested in. And let me show you a little bit of a set collection style vibe. And speaking of dragons, we're getting more dragons here as we were just talking about sea dragons. So essentially what you've got going on is you're going to be moving your dragons in that direction as the first part of any turn that you're taking, a fly action. And when you take that fly action, you take the top ring from each of the piles that you're leaving from. And so then when you land in that location, wherever you decide to go, not being able to pass through other dragons, then you have a couple different other actions that you can take, including, but not limited to, grabbing other rings from adjacent wells of where you're at. Again, up, down, left, right, not diagonal in that case, even though you can move and fly in diagonal. Then the other option is if you are next to like a shrine, you can pay a certain number of rings to acquire that shrine, which then allows you to transfer those rings over to your main board here and then fill that up as another way of scoring, not only in the pattern matching there, but also the color matching based on the elemental colors that are present that have to match the ring colors. And so that is the gist of the game in a nutshell, but this is what it says here. This is the part I love. Combine the dragons and the different islands to give you some asymmetry, because the dragons also in an advanced game have different powers about how they might be maneuvering or picking up those rings as well. And I love the aesthetic of this and the idea of this transparent board, so you can see the rings, you can see what's coming, you can see where things are at. I think it looks like a perfect weight style game that I've been loving a lot over the last year. Adam from Adam Apple's Games is right there telling you how to play it. He runs you through the mechanics. You can try it online in Tabletop Simulator, runs you through the asymmetry that you can see here front and back. And for the price point, you're actually getting wooden rings there too. So I like the idea of that much better than plastic, even though, again, it's a minor thing. The shrine cards, the sanctuary cards that you'll be acquiring, the shrine cards, as I mentioned, are ways that you're going to be having to put those rings in there to then get onto your main board. Slightly different because they're giving you different powers that you can acquire to change your dragon or make it more asymmetric as you go along. Which dragon do you want to do? Here you go. Check them out. You can see how the different elementals and the different maps have to be filled. Ones here, smoke rings make them non-adjacent. Then the wind element here, they have to be filled in a certain directional order. The horizontal adjacency is not allowed for these yellow rings there. The water flowing here, you have to fill low numbers to high numbers in terms of when you're putting them on the board. Plenty of content there as well, and you can check it out. And if this is anything like Planet Unknown, the deluxifications of the wood, I would make the argument in this case, like the deluxifications that came out with Planet Unknown, probably aren't going to be widely available or available anytime soon at retail. So that might be the incentive to look at it. It's got 17 grand. Give it a look-see. Okay, now Catharsis is coming back with a second edition here, dice rolling adventure board game. So if you think of it more of like Aeon's End meets Dice Throne, that's really what this vibe is. You have your each unique character decks you're going up against each unique boss decks, and you'll be doing a dice-based allocation system a la your Dice Throne, only slightly differently because you're not using like just the Yahtzee sum total, but you're dividing it between like your different abilities as you so choose. And that's what it is, right? RPG elements, monster fight, go head to head, take that, straightforward, and everything that you kind of need to know just in a nutshell right there, right? The gameplay mechanics, obviously you can go into a little bit more specifics in terms of the passives and the actives and all of those things across the board. The thing you need to know though is only the second edition base game is going to cost you, well, not that one, this, $130. So this is a hefty price point. Now, if you click on it, though, it says you're getting 12 bosses as well as 12 individual characters that you can play as down here. Magnetic trackers, magnetic pins, dice, and all the cardboard you can ever imagine. So, right, that's what you're paying for. There is no piecemealing it like Dice Throne, if you will, where, you know, okay, maybe I want just the 4 Marvel heroes. Maybe I want all of Season 1, right? Maybe I just want, nope, you're getting it all. Everything else is just more. Mega Pack, the only gameplay content right here for $360. Wow. I mean, this has try before I buy all over it. As someone who loves Dice Throne and loves Aeon's End, I may just have to trade for a copy to see if this is really that good, because I kind of see and have heard mixed opinions on it. Either you really love it or people were just kind of meh on it. And that's a expensive game to be meh on, knowing what it is. And you're getting a ton of content. It's not like I said, right? You can get like 6 characters and 3 bosses or for $50, you know, something slightly more palatable if you like in that sense. So the mega pack here, 12 character decks, 20 powers, roll cards. And the aesthetic is a little bit darker as a whole. So does this appeal to you? Honestly, this is going to be another one of those where after I finish filming this, I'm probably going to watch some video content to see, you know, truly mechanistically speaking, is this one for me? And I kind of like this standalone expansion crossover with all the Catharsis previous content. So again, give it a look-see and see if it's for you over on GameFound this week. Then, Starlock. This is a skirmish style. This actually reminds me more of the other GameFound one earlier this year that funded as a super indie style of things, Seismic, where you have to actually build your ship to escape. But you can even steal other people's ships as you're gathering your resources in a skirmish style action-based system. As you kind of go across, you have 5 characters on your asymmetric faction-based team, but at the beginning of the game, you get to choose 3 of them in order to plan your strategy out. That's going to include terrain, resource management, and then building of your actual little starship in order to escape. So that's kind of the game right there, right? $109 is going to get you the game as an early bird. $125 is going to get you it if you miss that out. And the Vanguard Circle here gets you some stretch goals as well. Okay, a little bit of extra content there. And if we click down here, game modes, PvP, solo, and co-op. Now, I was only looking at the PvP when I looked at the rules earlier. I'm not sure how solo would change it. Obviously, some events and some other actions to go along. And then I did see at the very end of the rulebook, because the rulebook's on the page here, co-op is available as well. They run you through a little bit of what the faction differences are, your follow support, and a bunch of free review content you can check out on whether or not it's right for you. So Starlock, I mean, you know, again, I sort of saw this one on the pre-launch pages and I was kind of curious. So there you go, $64,000. Congrats. Now, Dungeons of Doria reprint. So this is another of the multiple play modes, roguelike dungeon crawlers with tons and tons of combination. RPG-esque. I mean, tell me if you've heard that before in this video at all at this point, right? New backer edition gets you the expansion for $100. I love how we're just going straight into it. You don't even know about the game, just buy the game and the expansion straight off the board, right? That's sort of GameFound's especially MO, even more so than Kickstarter, it seems like nowadays. Then the base game alone is going to be $90 and stretch goals are going to be down here. So what are we actually doing gameplay-wise though? Scenarios, 20 driven single scenarios, 4 campaigns with 8 scenarios each, or just randomly a boss monster encountering with, well, events to go along the way. I mean, this is very D&D-esque if you click the rulebook here and you start to see some of the similarities that you're going to be, you know, just familiar with, right? Initiative points, hit points, side points, we'll skip those, but your basic attributes, your preparation of your character and their class and their starting equipment. You know, this is more of a, you know, prototypical dungeon crawl meets D&D, if you will. The equipment, the encumbering, how much you can carry, armoring, cards, you know, just galore in terms of the properties that you're going to be having to manage. So the phase system that they've got here in terms of the rounds, shopping for items, rolling for initiative, right? Tell me if you've heard that before in any D&D. Action phase system here with the basis of this being the initiative marker and then using a predetermined cost of each of these actions to take your turn before proceeding on to further parts of the round, including then the enemy phase if we get down further here. So again, kind of level up, buy your stuff, rinse and repeat, running through the individual actions as you can kind of see here of what their prerequisite action points are going to cost you. So again, which is your preferred? Is this how you want to do things? Is Ends of Evershade? Are any of these? And that'd be the big question is, which one of these is going to be right for you? And is it the most aesthetically pleasing or is it something else in between? And I think this one has gotten relatively good acclaim for a game that I didn't know much about before this month in the first place. So clearly people are going back to it with 48,000 of its 31,000 for first place. So there you go. Next up, Spire of Dioronna. This is actually based off of a sort of a situation in the 3-body problem from one of those books. The main character's name is. But essentially what you're doing here is this is going to be a card-driven sort of almost build your dungeon-esque style of things, as you're putting these cards together, mapping out horizontally because you have to have them all oriented the same way of these map cards. And based on the locations that you're going to be traversing, you can gather up the other item cards here in the partialities. And then you'll notice that these partialities are actually pictures of the full items. And so you're going to be using these partials to create full ones. The full ones will stay with you and be able to use those powers indefinitely. The partial ones you can spend one-time use as a discard to get that ability in the short term, because you can also steal abilities, you can combat, you can kind of push, nudge other people, you can skip turns, you can kind of do all of that stuff. So it gives you that aspect, because what you eventually have to do is you have to end up with the key in order to escape the escape room when that portion of the map cards are drawn and placed. And on your turn, you draw a card, play one of those map cards, and take an action. So here are all the things blown up. I actually had to watch the rules video, and it was not in English, although it was very nicely subtitled. So that's how you can kind of look and see. They talk a little bit here of how to use these cards as you line them up, like I just mentioned, to create the full item. So yeah, $26 if you get it on the day 2 special. At the time of me filming this, that's available, but for you guys, that might be the super early bird or the Kickstarter special. So for something new, something slightly twisting on the modular map in a card setup driven manner, $4,000 is pretty freaking good. There you go. Bards and Tales, The Journey of the Brave. Again, another sort of dungeon crawl-esque 1-5 solo co-op driven dice aspect. And before you say it, these are actually hand-drawn. This is not AI. They talk about the artist down below, these all being like huge portraits and ported over, and just, you know, some cool stuff from that aspect of things. So they talk about, again, the general gist of what you're going to be doing, traveling along as your hero journey progresses with random events and bounties of bad guys as you want to fight them and meet them along the way. Again, rule book right here in place, but this is going to be very much dice driven in terms of its mechanics, in the sense that, you know, when you're attacking or fighting someone else, you roll dice and the winner is the one who does more dice damage, and then you take the difference, and that's how much damage is done to your opponent. And so this one is probably the simplest of the ones in terms of the mechanical approach in this video today. Not going to be that much cheaper though at 65 euros. So then essentially what you're doing, like I said previously, right? You have your items, you have your setup, you have your classes, you have your scores, you have all of your combat prowess, you have the dice-driven aspects that I just mentioned as you create your combo based on what your abilities are, what your weapons are, and what dice each of them are going to give you. In terms of the combat mechanics, there's a little bit of difference in how you're going to be battling, say melee versus ranged. So they overview that a little bit, and there's some video content here as well. So this one still has a little bit of an uphill battle, but I mean, again, like $14,000, so I'd say they're well on track to be funded by the time this ends. Partners Duo board game, $5,700 at the time of me filming this. Folks, this is 2-player Sorry. It is. They did the Partners game, and I watched the how to play on this because there's not really a rule book, and there's not really even a halfway explanation on the page. But I watched the rule video, and it's Sorry. It's Sorry in a circle. Only instead of having 4 teams in this one, you each have 2 sets of 3 that you have to get around, and you can swap and Sorry and knock them out and move them backwards, and you have to have a certain one, a heart, to get them out. But the main difference being that if you can't play a card because you don't have one that's eligible, like if you only had all of yours in the start position and you couldn't get one out because you didn't have a heart card, you'd have to give up all of your cards on your turn-by-turn basis until the next round. And the round consists of 4 cards going back and forth until you either can't play or you play all 4 of your cards. But it's Sorry. It's just a slightly different version of Sorry. So if you want a 2-player version of Sorry, this is your game, and you want the Partners version with the multiplayer, you can get that as well too. So again, $5,000, check it out. Next up, Tripped. You're going to be taking 3 actions as you travel across this map, trying to connect all of the places that you need to go in your sort of card-driven location tableau. You get 1 place to start off, and then subsequently you have to go to all the other places before finally making it back home. Now you get like 3 actions per turn, and each of these actions, depending on what route you're taking from place to place, is going to cost you different. Roads, they're going to be free to go between. Trains, ships, and planes are going to cost you, though, tickets in order to go. You're then playing 2 cards that will give you either benefits or detriments to your other players, and then you draw back up your cards to your hand. You can have up to, like, I think, like 5 cards in your hand before you actually have to do anything else with them, because I don't think you have to play these cards. You can play them anytime on a turn until the moment new cards are drawn. So I mean, like, there's not specific timing necessarily, but as you go, the game progresses until someone gets that, like I said, all of 6 of their places, and then back to the beginning. So straightforward, a little bit of take that, and what you see is what you get. I kind of like the map, though. That map board is actually probably the coolest part of this game, from that, at least in my opinion. So there you go. That's the game. And what's it costing? I didn't even look at this. So, I mean, it's gonna cost you about $50 before shipping. That's a little more expensive for what I would like to think of a game like this, but people like it. 15 grand. Check it out. Boulder Bluff. Again, very straightforward game, actually. Got 12 grand funded at the time of me filming this. And essentially what you're doing is you're bouldering and bluffing. I mean, that's, the name stays very true to what you're doing. And so essentially what you have is you have this bouldering area, and it tells you the strength of what you need to go in the certain area. You've got like 3 of them laid out in front of you. And so you decide that you're either drawing cards to bolster your bluffing, if you will, bolster your bouldering. Gosh, that's a tongue twister. I'm surprised I could do that in one take. But then what you're doing instead of that potentially is then you're playing cards, and you play like 4 cards down. But you may be playing cards, you may be bluffing, because like if no one else follows you, everyone else is given a chance to boulder the same place as you do. And so then depending on how you do, you can, bluff, because if no one else puts them down, you don't have to reveal yours, because only one of your 4 cards actually has to be face up. And so then they're flipped face up, and then, you also subsequently can get rewarded if you're like the best, I believe, of the ones if other people follow you. But if no one follows you, then, because they either don't have enough or because they think you're going to beat them anyway, then you are going to get all the benefits. There is some take that with the other cards that are going along with this, and that includes the animals with the expansion pack here of how you're going to be changing your bluffs and changing some of the abilities, or even the mitigation, because there are cards out there like, everyone else that's bouldering this round gets -1 strength, for example. And so as you're prepping this and playing from your hand, like it says here, I forgot to mention, you're drawing a chalk token, and this is sort of the variability, right? Because it's sort of a Gloomhaven modifier-esque in either a +1, a -1, a +2, or a 0. That's going to give you, well, mitigation there, and potentially make or break your bouldering too. So there you go. I've been showing your cards, anti-bluff, pulling them into the climb, the other thing to never win. So that's what you're going to be doing, revealing your cards, and then highest one wins the boulder. But if you don't even get the number to boulder it, you actually take an injury, so you actually get a detriment potentially. So just a nice, straightforward filler style game, and looks kind of nice. Although, oof, $99 for this? What are you paying for? Oh, a t-shirt and a bag. Okay, $99 for a t-shirt and a bag, sure. $27 for the base game, and that's much more approachable and feasible. So give it a look-see. It's doing great so far. Runes. This is dominoes in a different way. And so essentially what you're doing is, I know I'm dumbing it down way too much, but runes essentially is you're connecting these hexagonally based tiles, and you have to have at least one of the previous sides that matches the coloring. And if you have more than one, you can potentially even replace or place over someone else's previously placed rune. And the goal of this game is not actually to place the tiles, but it's to place your coins that you have collected in front of you on these locations, because you get to place how many coins based on how many of the sides of the tile match. And if you can create other certain patterns that might be either just objectively present during the game in the first place, like putting it in like the middle of the grid or creating like a line, you get to put extra coins down, and the first one to get all their coins down on these hexes wins the game. And so I'm assuming, though, I didn't actually see this, but it would make sense in my head at least, is if that you stole someone else's hex. Like if you had this hex right here, if you can see where my mouse is, and someone only had 2 of these 3 sides matched up, if you could play one with 3 sides, I believe you lay your tile over it, or you actually even like replace their tile. But then I would assume that if you did that to their tile, maybe that their coins would go back to their board and yours would obviously go onto that tile. So just things like that, it's going to be the main dynamic, and it runs you through exactly kind of how you're matching these sides here and how you get to put the coins down. So right, really straightforward, a little bit of abstracty, a little bit of pretty thinky, but then you're also having the ability to get these ritual cards, which have a little bit of take that. So that's gonna be a little bit of a take that Uno style, if you will. And what you see is what you get. I kind of like the idea of this. This would be a nice family weight game for me. So if this appeals to you, everything is right here.
Let's see, we have, what is this? Oh, the extra action set to go along with it. That's why it's slightly more expensive. The early bird, though, is 36 euros. So, I mean, that's a little bit more expensive than I was expecting for this lighter. But honestly, though, crowdfunding nowadays, that also doesn't surprise me whatsoever. So give it a look-see. So almost 70% of the way funded. So hopefully they get there, but they have plenty of time to do so. Kickstarter, stop it.
And then we have Don't Be a Sheep, 10-year-old designed this game, and it's a party-based game. It's sort of a, Scattergory style vibe as they describe it. They forgot the rules of how to play Scattergory, so they made up their own version of it in the car on the way to a trip. Basically what it is that everyone selects an answer to a question that is given, and then you just get points based off of how many other people chose your same answer. But if everyone chose the same answer except for one person, then the person who was the one gets all of the other points and everyone else gets 0. And it's just rinse and repeat until you get enough points. And they give you 3 different categories on each card, sort of younger, older, and just more likely to have similar answers. Like the example they use down at the bottom is a famous cartoon mouse. Well, if 8 of the 9 people say Mickey and one person says Minnie, then Minnie is going to get 8 points and all the Mickeys are going to get 0. That's the game. There you go. People like it. It's, doing really good. $6,600. So give it a look-see. Vomitland. Yep. Press your luck vomiting based off of roller coasters, shops, or buying items to refresh yourself. I know, everybody has a body part fluid that they are especially not fond of and cannot tolerate. So mine is not vomit, surprisingly. I'm not telling you what it is, though. What you're going to be doing is you're going to be doing a press your luck style situation as you draw cards from this deck. And then based on this, you increase your nausea meter and you press your luck until either your nausea meter runs out or everyone else has to jump off the roller coaster and you essentially get to pick the card, which is going to give you the set collection bonus style victory points that you need later on. And then you can also go to the shop or the bathroom to lower your nausea or acquire items to help you do it again. You have individual objectives that you're going to be trying to do, but then you also get negative victory points if you vomit along the way. Everything's there. It is what it is. Not a huge fan of the aesthetic, but just not a huge fan of green vomit, right? So there you go. But again, surprisingly, it's funded, right? $4,400. So congrats to them for doing really good. There you go. That is the roundup this week. Everything you need to know. It's huge names, money getting thrown around, and November still has a bunch to come. So it's going to be great. It's going to be a great month. And I got to figure out what I'm going to do because, truth be told, as much as I said at the beginning of the Lands of Evershade looks like Dungeons and Dragons, the board game to me. There is sort of a appeal there to get it because, as someone, I've said this once or twice on the channel previously and elsewhere in other videos, that right prior to the pandemic, me and my brother-in-laws tried to do D&D and I was the DM and it was horrible. I'm not very good at it. But we were just starting and then the pandemic hit and then it broke apart. So I look at that as sort of a nostalgia way to get back in something that I clearly don't have the bandwidth for otherwise. But is it a pipe dream or not? That's, I think, my conundrum. Just like with Dice Throne Outcast. Do I need more Dice Throne Outcasts? I don't know. There you go. Have a great freaking fantastic weekend. I am going to go check out some Aeon Trespass Odyssey and Enormity because at least one of those videos will be coming out next week. Let me know which one you'd like to see first. Enormity, the new stuff, what's going on in that box, or a little bit of Cycle 4-5 from Aeon Trespass Odyssey. As always, I bid you adieu. Stay classy. Have a great freaking weekend.